Good going. All right, again, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're excited to be able to have this session, be able to reschedule this session and offer this with you today. We're joined by Allison Hosier, who is the head of information literacy and a librarian at the University at Albany. She's the author of Using Context in Information Literacy Instruction through the American Library Association. In addition to her work in information literacy, Allison has become interested in the role of generative AI in teaching and learning. She's been providing professional development on this topic to librarians, faculty, and instructional designers since 2023, and we're thrilled that she could be here to do that with us today. As we go along, please feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat, and we'll be sure to address those at the end of the presentation. Thanks, Allison. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on AI and academic integrity. My name, as you just heard, is Allison Hosier, and I'm the head of information literacy at the University of Albany. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about the challenges that the growing use of AI has presented for teaching and learning in general when it comes to academic integrity, but also for online learning especially, where it seems like students feel as if there's less of a barrier when it comes to pushing the ethical line, so to speak. But then, the question becomes, well, where is that line? And how do we know where it is? And how do students know where it is? And that's some of what I'll be talking about today. So first, I wanted to start with a little bit of information about me and how I came to this whole AI thing. Like a lot of us in education, I was dragged into AI pretty much kicking and screaming. After ChatGPT came out in November 2022, my boss at the time asked me to start looking for ways to integrate AI into my teaching about information literacy and into some of the tutorials and other online materials that I had created. So I was resistant, to put it mildly. To me, ChatGPT just seemed like a passing trend that everyone was going to treat like the hot thing for a while and then it would go away. And obviously that didn't happen. Anyway, it wasn't until April 2023 that I actually started to take the time to learn more about generative AI in particular. And when I did, I was surprised. I actually saw a lot of connections between generative AI and my area of specialization, information literacy. So since part of what I'm going to be talking about today is related to information literacy, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about what I mean by that phrase, even though it may be review for a lot of you here already. But information literacy is a phrase that I think is usually associated with library research skills or basic research skills. But actually, there's always been more to it than that. On a basic level, information literacy is about helping students and other researchers find, evaluate, and use information in various contexts. And in an academic environment, that does entail teaching students about how to use library databases and peer-reviewed sources for their academic research. But information literacy applies more broadly to many types of research, such as professional research, creative research, and personal research as well. So beyond this basic level, information literacy isn't just about skills. It's also a conceptual framework that includes deeper ideas about authority and authorship, the ownership of information, the ethical use of information, and more. And the Association of College and Research Libraries has a document called the Framework for Information Literacy for Higher Education that includes some of this more conceptual thinking. So if you're not familiar with it, I definitely recommend taking a look because it's a great way to become familiar with information literacy on a more nuanced level. So AI isn't mentioned in that document since the version we have now was authored in 2015. But if you do take a closer look at it, you may start to see some of the connections between information literacy and AI, not only when it comes to the more basic skills associated with finding, evaluating, using, and creating information, but also these deeper concepts related to authorship and authority, the ethical use of information, and the ownership of information. So once I discovered these connections myself, I started to wade into the AI waters in earnest. And in the last few years, I've done a lot of presentations and taught professional development courses on using AI for teaching and learning. And this is also a topic I've written about and become published on. And this year, I even became one of SUNY's AI for Public Good Fellows, which is a group focused on the implementation of the revised information literacy core competency which now incorporates AI as an emerging technology that's affecting how we interact with information, which is work that I'm really excited to be doing. So the point here is that because of my information literacy perspective, what this means is that no matter what audience I'm talking to, my goal when I speak about AI is to help us all think critically about our use of generative AI and the information that it generates, whether that information comes in the form of text, an image, audio, or something else. And I also like to help people move toward what I call cautious curiosity about AI. And what this means is that if you're someone who's tended to avoid I want to get you to a place where you recognize that avoiding AI altogether forever is unfortunately not realistic. And maybe it's worth dipping your toe in the water of some of the conversations going on around AI, even if you're not ready or not willing to experiment with AI itself. And for those on the other end of the spectrum, those who are AI enthusiasts and think everyone should be using AI for everything, moving toward cautious curiosity means not just accepting AI at face value and understanding that concerns about the ethics around AI and the impacts it's having are very valid. So that's my goal with you today as well. It's important to me for you to know that because I feel like a lot of presentations on AI feel like they're trying to sell you something. And that's not me. I do think AI has some potential benefits for teaching and learning, though accessing some of those benefits may in the long term require us to change how we think about teaching and learning. But I also know that AI has posed some real challenges and some of us are really struggling, and I want to acknowledge that. Okay, so let's talk about information literacy and academic integrity and how AI fits into all of this. So let's start with what it means to take an information literacy approach to academic integrity, which in the case of AI means helping our students and ourselves understand the relationship between these tools. And I'll be talking today mostly about generative AI like ChatGPT and academic integrity. So first, I want to tackle what I think have been the most common questions about generative AI from both faculty and students in the year since it came out in relation to academic integrity. The first is using AI plagiarism? And the second is, can AI be cited? The reason I want to start with these is because these questions have been around since ChatGPT first became available in 2022. But as with everything related to AI, the answers to them keep evolving. In these questions, I also see a tendency to try to fit the square peg of AI into the round hole of how we're used to talking about academic integrity, which is often through the lens of plagiarism and citation. So most of our conversations with students about AI have never really extended much past these concepts, and we tell them not to use words or ideas that are not their own without giving credit to the source, and the way to give credit is through citation. So information generated by AI clearly qualifies as words and often ideas that are not the student's own. But whose words and ideas are they? And if they're generated by something that's not human, do they need to be cited? So there are no settled answers to these questions yet because AI itself is changing so quickly and because of how we use and think about AI is changing really quickly as well. But here's what where my own thinking is at least at the present moment. First, I would say that AI is technically not plagiarism, at least not the way plagiarism is most often defined, which is as the use of someone else's words or ideas. AI is not someone else. It's not a person, and it's not an author. It's not creating anything or having ideas. And I don't think we actually know yet who owns the copyright to information generated by an AI, but it's not the AI itself because our current laws don't account for the possibility of a piece of information being owned by something that is not either human or a corporation. So because of that, I'm going to be a bit nitpicky and argue that using AI isn't plagiarism. But it certainly is a violation of academic integrity if it's used in a way that's not aligned with an instructor's course policies or rules they've set for a specific assignment. So that means if a professor doesn't want a student using AI and the student uses AI, it's a violation. And if a professor doesn't want a student using AI in a specific way and then they use it in that way, that's a violation as well. And if a professor requires a student to disclose the use of AI or the citation of AI, and then not doing that is also a violation. And of course, this puts a lot of the onus on the professor to decide what they will and won't allow. And a lot of instructors say that they feel like they're spending all their time now policing students' use of AI rather than focusing on their actual teaching. And other instructors have told me that they don't feel supported by their department or institution when they report a student who has violated a policy or rule that they've made. And I think this is one of the reasons why so many folks are interested in having AI policies at the institutional level, because then it will make it easier to know what to do in their own teaching, and maybe the institution will have more interest in enforcing its own policies rather than the policies of an individual professor. And I have my own reservations about institutional level policies, at least ones that are too specific. But I want to acknowledge that these concerns exist, and that if our institutions want us to create our own policies, then they do have to get better at helping us enforce those policies when appropriate. So for those of us with the opportunity to advocate for that through shared governance or some other means, it's definitely worth doing. Because as we'll see on the next slide, the inconsistency and lack of clarity creates problems not only for instructors, but also for students. So here I want to go over some of the issues with AI and academic integrity in general before taking a closer look at issues with AI and academic integrity with online learning. And I'm sure a lot of these are familiar to you already, but they're worth taking the time to review and acknowledge. So first, the biggest issue with AI and academic integrity isn't so much that students are using AI, which can be a great tool for learning, is that they're using it in ways that replace their thinking rather than supporting it. And they're using AI to generate entire essays or discussion posts or responses to their peers. They're using it to write what are supposed to be personal reflections. And if we ask them to do a video, they might use it to generate scripts to read from. So instead of searching for their sources, they're also generating lists of citations and then copying and pasting them into their papers or presentations. And they're doing all of this without engaging with the material and the ideas enough to understand it and to start to form their own thinking around it. So they're submitting work that's not representative of their own thinking and learning. And for those of us who care so much about learning, that's alarming to see. So I already acknowledged that when professors and instructors have to create their own policies, it creates a lot of extra work, even for those who are comfortable doing that and know what they want to say. And a lot of instructors aren't comfortable doing that. Maybe they don't feel like they know enough about AI or about how AI might be used or the ethical issues around AI to make an effective or fair policy. Or maybe it doesn't feel like something they should be deciding, that it should be coming from a higher level. Then there's the problem that even if a policy exists and is displayed prominently on the syllabus or a course webpage and is discussed with students in detail, students may just ignore the policy and use AI anyway. And others may be aware of the policy and want to follow it, but maybe the policy isn't clear enough, or they're not sure what they're doing follows it and they don't want to ask because then they don't want to be accused of cheating. So they use AI and hope for the best, and sometimes that gets them into trouble. And the fact that instructors are all coming up with their own policy also creates a lot of inconsistency for students, where a particular use of AI may be okay for one course or one type of assignment, but in another course, the same AI use might get you a failing grade if it's discovered. So that's confusing, and students may not know how to navigate the differences between their classes. And again, they don't want to ask because they're afraid to be accused of cheating. And a lot of this would be moot if AI detectors were a thing. And I get asked all the time what my opinion is on various AI detectors or if I have one that I recommend. And the truth is, I don't really recommend AI detectors. And I think they're problematic for a number of reasons, including a lack of accuracy and a tendency toward bias when it comes to what types of writing and what types of writer they label as AI versus which ones they don't. And I also have some concerns about what it means to feed students work, which is their intellectual property, into a tool that then learns from and uses their work in ways that we may not fully understand. So for what it's worth, that's a problem I've always had with plagiarism detectors, but that's a story for another time. Going back to AI detectors, the other problem with them is that AI changes really fast, and I don't know how well AI detectors can keep up. That said, I do know that at least some instructors who use them, and relatively few of the ones that I know swear by them, but some feel like they're good enough, even if they're not perfect. So it's become kind of a shortcut. So when it comes to AI detectors, if you feel like they help you and you're aware of the possible issues, then I'm not going to recommend that you stop using them. But in the end, they really are just a shortcut. And I don't know what they'll ever do what we want them to do as well as we want them to do it. So that's just an issue to keep in mind. And finally, because policies are hard to enforce and because AI detectors don't work as well as we might want them to, some professors have gone to extremes like going back to blue book essay tests and other paper and pencil in class activities to prevent AI use for certain aspects of their course, which is fine if your course has an in-person component. So that brings us to AI and academic integrity in online learning. So I don't have any data on this, but from my own experience, teaching online, it does sometimes feel like students are more prone to cheating in general because the online environment can feel less real or less engaging to them. So they feel like they're less likely to get caught or like the stakes are lower if they do. And I imagine that the same is true for AI. They're more likely to use it in unauthorized ways because the learning experience feels less personal. They also may use it in unauthorized ways by mistake because they don't understand the policy and it can feel even harder to ask questions in an online class than an in-person one. And blue books are all well and good for anyone who teaches in person and wants to go that route, but options like that don't work for fully online asynchronous courses. And there are ways to monitor students, like having students record themselves or using some kind of live proctoring. Those don't always work the way that they're meant to, and they can also add even more of a burden onto instructors and students as well. So to summarize this, I think it's safe to say that technology just hasn't really caught up to preventing students from using AI in ways that violate academic integrity. Whether your aim is to ban AI completely or only have them use it in specific ways or for specific assignments. AI is just changing too quickly. And if I'm honest, I think our thinking about AI and its place in education is going to change before the technology intended to prevent its use is going to catch up. And I'm not saying that because I'm in love with AI or anything, or even because I think all of the changes it will bring will be good. I'm saying that because as time goes on, we're going to see more and more students for whom AI has always been part of their education and learning. Even now, the students who will be entering college next year are ones who were just starting high school when ChatGPT became available. So using AI is just going to be normal to a lot of them, though certainly not all. And AI companies are also finding ways to push into primary and secondary education for better or for worse. So more and more students are probably going to be coming to us from schools where AI was integrated into their learning. And again, I'm not saying I personally love that idea, but I think some version of it is likely going to happen, which means that we're going to have to adapt how we think about and approach AI to better meet students where they're going to be at when they come to us in the first place. Either way, I don't think we can rely on the hope that technology is going to catch up quickly enough to safely and reliably prevent AI use. It's likely the cultural norm that will change first. I've also included here my opinion that creating AI-proof assignments is unrealistic, especially in an online environment. And I know that hearing that may be difficult or disappointing. I also know that there are folks here who might feel differently about that than I do. But I told you at the beginning that I'm not here to sell you anything, and so I want to be honest with you about the conclusion that my own experience has led me to. I understand where the impulse to AI-proof our assignments come from. And we spend a lot of time designing those assignments, thinking about how they fit into what we're teaching and what we want students to learn. And we spent so much time and effort finding strategies that work. And now those strategies may not work, or at least not in the same way. And let's just say it, that sucks. But overall, I think the better strategy is to figure out how to work with AI, at least a little, and while still thinking critically about it, than spending too much time and energy working against it. And I know that's easy for me to say and a lot harder to do. So where does all this leave us? Well, first, I think we have to help students and ourselves better understand not only AI, but also academic integrity and what it's for. In my opinion, we don't pay enough attention to how we actually talk to students about academic integrity and how the way we talk about it doesn't quite fit with the situation we're currently in with AI, which causes some areas of disconnection that I'll be talking about more in a minute. And I also think it would help to take the time to try to understand why students violate academic integrity, beyond assuming that they're lazy or just looking for shortcuts. And we need to start making clearer and stronger connections between education and learning rather than education as a transaction. And we need to recognize that this is a lot of change that we're dealing with, and it's all happening very quickly. We can't stop the change from happening, but how we feel about it is also important. So let's start with the first part by taking some time to better understand what academic integrity is and pay more attention to how we talk about it. So the reason I say it's important to pay more attention to how we talk about academic integrity is because when I tried looking up definitions of this idea for a past presentation on a similar topic, I discovered something weird, which is that it's really hard to find a description of what exactly academic integrity is. Instead, you're more likely to find descriptions of what it isn't: cheating, dishonesty, plagiarism, ethical violations, etc. So when we talk to students about academic integrity, we tend to do the same thing. We tell them not to cheat, not to plagiarize, all of that. But we don't really take much time to talk with them about what academic integrity is, beyond making sure to cite your sources, much less what it's for. So if you want to understand these issues, I think an obvious place to look is at your institution's statements on academic integrity. And this is an example from my own institution, UAlbany. And you can see that even this excerpt is pretty long, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. And it doesn't define academic integrity, but it does at least talk about what academic integrity is supposed to do, which is create an environment of discovery and intellectual growth. And there are also other factors like ensuring value and reputation and the reputation of the institution's degree program. So there's a lot going on here. And when you read a statement like that, I think academic integrity can be distilled into three important elements. The first is valuing discovery and intellectual growth. The second is that a degree that you earn should represent learning, achievement, and hard work. And finally, academic integrity ensures the value and reputation of a degree program and of an institution. And these are all important to the educational endeavor, which I think is something we can all agree on. But now we have to ask ourselves, are these factors important to students? And I think the answer is yes, but that it's complicated. And I think that looking more closely at some of those complications helps us understand some of the reasons why students might use AI, despite the way that it might interfere with the learning process and with their education as a whole. So to do that, we have to start by looking at the purpose of education. So as educators, it's laughably obvious to us that getting an education is about learning. Why else would anyone be here? But to students, learning is important, but if you ask them to name 5 reasons why they're in college, learning is probably not going to be the first, the second, or maybe even the 5th thing they name. They're in college because ultimately they want a good job. The way to get a good job is to get a degree. The way to get a degree is to get a good grade. Many students, certainly not all, tend to view education in these transactional terms. So learning is important, but ultimately the grade for a lot of them is more important. So to be clear, this is not new. I certainly remember being this way when I was a student. And personally, I really liked learning even back then, but grades on assignments and in my courses were how I ultimately measured my success. Ideally, my grades reflected my learning, or at least my ability to demonstrate what I'd learned to the satisfaction of the instructors grading me. But if you'd asked me back then to choose between learning something and getting a good grade, I probably would have chosen the grade. And of course, I've had a lot more life experience since then, so I know that grades are not the be all and end all. I've never been hired to a job based on my undergraduate GPA. Getting admitted to grad school, to the extent that it was about my ability, was more about my score on the GREs than my grades in my bachelor's program. So I know now that the knowledge I gained as an undergraduate was actually more valuable than my grades, but I didn't know that back then, and I had to learn it over time. And most of the students we work with don't have that perspective yet. So all of this to say, if you think about education as being about learning, the problem with AI becomes clear. It can certainly interfere with learning, especially when it's used to replace someone's thinking rather than support it. It can also interfere with critical thinking. There's research that's starting to come out right now that shows that that's the case. So if you're someone who cares about learning, that's incredibly concerning. It might even feel like an existential threat. But I do want to add that AI can also aid learning, just to be fair. There is some research to support this as well, that generative AI can help with brainstorming and ideation. It can help you identify gaps or blind spots in your own knowledge that you didn't know were there. It can act as a tutor or help make learning materials more accessible. It can be especially helpful for students who are learning or writing in a language that isn't their first language. So if you think of education as being about learning, like many educators do, then AI has both benefits and risks. And we don't know yet whether the risks outweigh the benefits, but the key thing is that in order for AI to aid learning, it has to be used in the right way. And a lot of students, though again, not all of them, aren't doing that. So the reason that they're not doing that is simple. Generative AI can and does interfere with learning when not used in thoughtful ways, but what it's less likely to interfere with is getting a good grade. And it's true that many instructors have policies against using AI or using it only in a certain way, but the challenges of detecting AI and enforcing these policies are such that a lot is probably slipping through without being noticed. So for students who prioritize grades over learning, the idea of using AI is less of a problem than those of us who prioritize learning think it should be. True, by using AI to replace your own thinking, you're not learning anything other than how to outsource your thinking to a machine. But if you still get a good grade and still get a degree at the end of it, then what's the problem? Some of them might wonder. So AI has made it even easier than it already was for more students than ever to lose sight of the connection between education and learning. It's made education even more transactional for them than it might already have been. So when we think about why they violate academic integrity, this idea finds its way into our thinking. We assume students violate academic integrity because they view education as transactional, because they're lazy, because they don't care. And certainly for some students, that's going to be true. Maybe they're only here because they feel like they have to be, or because their parents told them they need to be, or because for traditional age students, going to college is just what you're supposed to do at this age, and it's what their peers are doing. So those are certainly reasons to use AI in ways that violate academic integrity. But there are a lot of other possible reasons too, ones that we would do well to keep in mind. So sometimes students violate academic integrity because, somewhat ironically, they're still learning. They've been in school since they were 5 years old, but this is the first time they've had to do this kind of work. And sometimes you make mistakes. It happens. Sometimes they do it because they lack confidence in their own knowledge or abilities. And that's actually a big part of what makes using AI so tempting. We often expect students to write and present as if they're already experts on topics that they're just learning about. That's hard for anyone to do, but it can be especially hard when you know you have a grade riding on how well you sound, like you know what you're talking about. AI doesn't have that problem. It sounds like it knows what it's talking about, no matter what the topic is and whether or not that's the case. And a lot of students also have competing priorities. They probably have other courses. A lot of them have jobs. Some have parents and siblings they want to spend time with. Others might have kids they want to spend time with or other caregiving responsibilities. And maybe they have sports or other activities that they're involved in. Maybe they just want to hang out with their friends. The point is that our courses are important, but they're unlikely to be the center of any student's world. So something that saves them time and doesn't damage their GPA can be tempting, even if they know it's wrong. That's especially true for traditional age students who are managing their own time for the first time. They're still developing the skills they need around how to do that. And another reason that we've already touched on is that students are given a lot of inconsistent information about AI use. So some of their professors are really strict about it. Others might think it's okay. Most are probably somewhere in between. It's genuinely confusing. And sometimes it's hard to keep straight and they do the wrong thing in the wrong class. Other times they may not understand why it's okay to use AI in one class and not another, and decide to use it anyway, even if they know they shouldn't. And we need to take that potential confusion into account when we're dealing with violations of academic integrity related to AI. So to be clear, this does not make dealing with academic integrity violations any less frustrating. And as an educator who values learning, it can be really hard not to take it personally. You put so much time and effort into what you teach and how you teach it. You want students to care about the material as much as you do. And when students violate academic integrity, it can make you feel like they don't, like they're wasting their time and yours. That's valid. All I'm trying to say here is that not all violations of academic integrity are deliberate or malicious. Not all of them are signs that students don't care. And some of them don't, but you can't do anything about that. There are ones that do, but who mess up anyway, or test the boundaries anyway, but that's always been true. AI certainly amplified the problem, but it didn't create it. If you can, try not to take it personally, although it's really hard. All right, So all this is well and good, but what are the takeaways here and what can we actually do? So first, I would say try to accept that creating AI proof assignments is not realistic, especially if you're teaching in an online environment. I already talked about why earlier, and I understand why there may be a lot of grief around this, especially for those who are teaching in subjects where students have always been expected to do a lot of writing that they can now just do with AI if they want to. I really do suspect that the norms around AI use will change faster than any technology that can detect or prevent its use. So a lot of this is just sort of, you want to choose where you put your energy. Second, as much as possible, be clear about what academic integrity looks like in your class and why it looks that way. Don't just tell students on the syllabus not to plagiarize. Talk to them about what you're teaching them and why, and what the value of what they're learning is supposed to be. How will spending real time with these ideas help them? How did you struggle with these ideas when you first learned them? How have you used them since then? That part about struggle is especially important because it points to another reason that students might turn to AI. Students, particularly traditional age students, think that if they're struggling, they're doing something wrong, when we know that the opposite is actually true. To learn anything, you have to struggle. And that's uncomfortable, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be unsuccessful. My next recommendation is to not only state your own goals, but get students to think about what they want to learn, what their goals are for this class, other than getting a good grade. This helps them make that connection between your class and learning, and it's also an opening to get them to think about how using AI can enhance their learning and help them meet their goals, and how it might interfere with their learning. This makes for a good in-class activity in in-person teaching, but how do you do it in an online class? Well, you can still make it an activity. You can make using AI to help them you can actually even make using AI to help them come up with ideas an option. And for certain activities in the course, you can ask them how to to state how the activity relates to one of their earlier goals and how AI might have enhanced their learning for this activity. And will all of them engage with it meaningfully? No. Will some of them use AI to just create their answers for them, even the parts that are supposed to be personal reflections on what they want to learn and why they want to learn it? Probably. And will that be super frustrating? Yes. Is this an activity still worth it? And that's probably going to be up to you, but I think it's worth experimenting and seeing what happens and not getting discouraged if it doesn't go the way that you want it to, or if more students use AI than you would like. After all, we're still learning too, and connecting activities like this with your own learning can be helpful and important. So the next one is to make sure students know that using AI comes with equity issues. So as we know, not everyone has easy access to the internet, even if they're taking an online class, and not everyone can pay for access to more powerful AI tools than the ones you can get for free. So bringing AI into the classroom means creating equity issues where not everyone has the same opportunity to use the same tools or the same versions of those tools. A student might think it's okay to use AI if it helps them get a better grade, but do they still think it's okay if someone who can pay more for a more expensive subscription gets a better grade than they do because they're working with a better AI tool? Probably not. But making sure students are thinking about that aspect of things may not change their minds about using AI, but it might make them more critical or knowledgeable users. Plus, it introduces a certain element of peer pressure. If their classmates think that using AI is unfair when not everyone has access, then that might be more meaningful to them than just being told that their instructor doesn't want them to use it. The next recommendation is to model boundaries around AI use. So this first means that you have to establish boundaries around AI use for yourself. So what, if anything, are you okay with using AI for? What are you not okay with using it for? For me, I use it quite a bit to help me brainstorm ideas and even get started with research on new topics. But I never share my own intellectual property with AI because AI companies are not transparent about what happens to the information we share with it. I'm also careful not to use AI to replace my own voice. So to illustrate this, I'll use this presentation. I used AI in the beginning stages to help me plan parts of this presentation. I asked it for an outline to work from and general ideas and takeaways to aim for. And in the end, I went more in my own direction, but using it to brainstorm this way did help me get started. And if I'd kept going with its suggestions, I might have asked it to create a PowerPoint for me or suggest slide content for me for the presentation that it was describing. And I've done that before for other presentations, and I found that it enables me to think more about what I'm going to say and how I'm going to say it, which is part of the presentation that I find most valuable. And if I wanted to, I could save even more time by asking the AI to write a script for me for the slides it created. And I'll be honest, I did that once as an experiment, and what it came up with wasn't bad, but it wasn't me. It didn't sound like me. It didn't reflect my own thinking and learning about a topic. It probably had errors in it, but they weren't my errors. So when I write a script for a presentation like this, I do it for myself, for better or for worse. Those are my boundaries. And maybe you have similar boundaries, or maybe you're perfectly fine with having AI write for you. Or maybe you don't use AI at all because of the ethical concerns, and that's totally fine. Your boundaries are yours, and they may change over time. They may become more open or more strict, depending on how this AI thing develops. But the important thing is to think about what boundaries you have and why you have them, and be able to talk about that with students. Because students need to be thinking about boundaries too, and modeling our own boundaries isn't about telling them what they can and can't do. It's about showing them that there are different approaches based on different values. Not everyone is going to approach AI the same way, and that's okay. All right, this next one is hard. To a certain extent, I think you have to accept that no matter what you do, there will always be at least some students who get it wrong. Some of them get it wrong intentionally. They know they're cheating and for whatever reason decide that the risk is worth it. And some of them get it wrong because they're still learning or they just don't know any better. It happens and it's frustrating. But this isn't new. AI didn't create this issue, though it certainly complicated it. It made it easier for students who might not cheat otherwise, whether intentionally or otherwise, to do it anyway. But at the end of the day, our students are adults and they need to decide for themselves what they want to get out of their education. We can't decide for them. So this doesn't mean that if you catch a student, there shouldn't be consequences. There definitely should. And it doesn't mean that we should be okay with every student using AI in ways we don't want them to. Absolutely not. It just means that there's no perfect solution to the problem of academic dishonesty, no matter what form that dishonesty takes. There never has been. So if you do everything you feel like you possibly can, and this is still happening, go easy on yourself. You didn't do anything wrong. You can't control students' choices. That said, if a student does violate academic integrity, try to take a compassionate approach if you can. Not every situation is going to call for it, but recognize that academic dishonesty can be a sign that a student is struggling, whether with what they're learning or with time or with something else. You're not their therapist, but it can be valuable to at least understand where their struggle is if they're willing to share some of that with you. And if you can work with them, that's great. If you can't, or they're not willing or able to, that's fine too. This is more just a reminder of what I said earlier. It's hard not to take this academic dishonesty personally, but most of the time it really isn't personal at all, and reminding ourselves of that can save at least some of our sanity. And finally, be patient with yourself, with your students, and with the technology. AI has introduced a lot of change very quickly. The world has not caught up yet. Education has not caught up yet. It's going to take time to understand and adjust to the changes that are happening. We don't know yet where all of this is going, and that can feel frightening. We want easy solutions, and we want them now. And unfortunately, there aren't any, at least that I know of. So if you don't have it figured out yet, don't feel bad. No one does. If you're taking the time to learn what you can and stay current, and if you're comfortable doing so, experimenting, then in my opinion, you're doing the right thing. You're on the right path. Last, for real this time, I want to end with a reminder that whatever you're feeling about AI and the effect it's having on your teaching, whether it's excitement or dread or anger or some mix of all those things, that's okay. This is legitimately a challenging time that has the potential for a lot of creativity and excitement, but it's also a lot of change to take on board. And I wish I had more specific practical suggestions to address some of these issues with academic integrity, and I'm sure you wish that too. But while I think there are things we can start doing to change our thinking and our practice on a fundamental level that will help in the long run, I've learned in the couple of years I've spent talking about and learning about AI that pretending to have a magic solution doesn't help that much because AI really is tricky. And I want to be honest with you about that. So that said, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have now, or if you're dealing with a tricky situation and want an outside perspective, always happy to offer practical suggestions and think through challenges with you. Please feel free to contact me anytime, or if you have a question now, I think there might be, I'm not sure if there are any in the chat or if there's anything else that we might want to look
Thanks, Allison. None in the chat, but certainly we have time for folks to unmute and ask questions. I would also love to invite you to share your challenges with AI or your concerns in this
at.
group that we have gathered today. So feel free to type in the chat or unmute and chat with us.
I teach Intro to Lit. So in the
Mm.
beginning of the course, I was getting a lot of, plagiarism from using AI.
Mhm.
But I didn't teach this past semester, but I have a class in the spring, and I plan on doing a lot more. It's a traditional class, in-class writing. I did anyway, but I still, ran into AI. Um, but I find that if I get a feel of how they write in class and having them write in class, someone even suggested at SUNY New Paltz, a full professor, that some people were bringing in, for instance, marble notebooks for everyone, and they put their name on it, and it's collected after each class so that you have their writing. But obviously, you cannot do that with all essays. But I plan on doing more in-class writing. Any other thoughts on this from anyone?
Yeah, I'll say that if you have sort of an in-person component and you have an opportunity to sort of have them do that writing in class. I think what you said there was really great about how that's an opportunity to kind of get to know the students' voices.
Yeah,
So even if they're using AI otherwise or whatever, you can kind of, you're still getting their voices, you're still helping them develop their voices. So I think I really like that coming at it from that perspective rather than just punishing them and preventing them from using AI. I would really talk with them about it if you haven't already, that this
oh,
is
sure.
about kind of
Yeah.
developing your own voice and the importance of that and why that's something that you want to
Mhm.
do.
And of course, I only teach one class at a time. So, it's a lot easier for me than folks who are teaching
Sure.
five, English classes. So, a different
Absolutely.
situation. Yeah. But I will work on it. Thank you.
No, that's great.
Hi, can I just ask a question? Um, it's Victoria, and I am wondering how people are coordinating or introducing AI if they're using it in their lesson plan. For example, I trying to embrace it, understanding that it's uh, not going away. And so what I have students do is I have them send me a draft before they're going to introduce it or submit it to any type of AI. I'm not sure. I just want to see their writing before it goes in. And I want them to know that I'm paying attention to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering if Teresa, I know you had a question. If you want to jump in on a response to that, feel free. Or Vanessa also may have a response to that.
Yeah. And I think again for if you don't mind me kind of cutting in for an activity like that, I think like I said a moment ago, I think really sort of talking to students about that sort of importance of wanting to see what their writing is like. And I think too, because a lot of students are really, I think in some ways kind of shy about their writing because they have trouble sounding confident or they're afraid of making mistakes. And I think kind of really making clear that like, okay, your writing's not going to be perfect and that's okay. Like we're not expecting it to be perfect. This is a draft, but this is a way to understand who you are as a writer and why, their individuality as a writer is important because I think that that's something really big that AI can take away is our voice and our individuality. I mean, if we wanted to, we can tell it to mimic our voice, which is creepy. But it's sort of important also, for us, it's sort of scary when people talk about a future where, the standard writing is kind of that bland AI voice. It's a little bit scary to think about. And I think with students, especially traditional age students, they're at an age where they're developing their voice anyway. So I think that there's a particular vulnerability there because they want to, they're at an age where if they don't develop their voice, it's going to be a lot harder to do it later. So they need to kind of spend time doing it now and just kind of understanding that it doesn't have to be perfect, that it is a draft. And really talking with them about that and why it's important, again, to see what their writing is like, even if it's not perfect, and being okay with it not being perfect and kind of emphasizing that maybe with your grading, if you're doing grading at this stage as well, is kind of the thought that I'm having off the top of my head. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's sort of what comes to mind. And I don't know if there are others who have thoughts as well.
And being able to use that opportunity to provide the feedback to them on those drafts, right?
Yes,
That's important. So
yes.
if there are
So
other
they can hear your
recommendations
voice.
about, yeah, if there are other
Yeah.
recommendations about the writing process, just feel free to throw those in the chat for all of us to consider. So
Yeah.
Teresa, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you so much. Allison, I really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you. I'm an instruction librarian at SUNY Cobleskill, and I'm new to campus. So we do not have a center for teaching and learning here. And
Okay.
I know that you had talked about no assignment being AI proof. But I know one of the things that I'm really trying to help faculty understand is that there's ways for us to design assignments with where we're utilizing AI as a tool, which
Yes.
makes it where we're kind of emphasizing the teaching of how to use it as a tool in assignment so that students kind of have a little bit of guidance in terms of how to use it appropriately. Where I'm failing, and again, I'm kind of brand new to it, but I would love to be able to direct them to additional resources with specific AI assignments. And I'm wondering if you know of anything like that. I have a background in open, so I'm used to kind of looking into open resources. But at this point, I would buy a lot of books if they could give me good examples.
Yeah, I would buy those books too. The problem is they'd probably become really outdated really fast because AI just changes so quickly. But no, I love that you're thinking in those terms, and and that's a really good addition to kind of what I was saying before about if you are going to allow students to use AI, think about building in kind of that guidance. Don't just assume that students know how to use AI or know how to do it correctly or effectively. There are a lot of faculty that I work with through my work with the Center of Professional Development who want students to kind of be able to prompt AI a certain way. And they write the assignment that way. And I said, okay, well, you have to test it first to see what it actually does. And then you also could help by demonstrating for students as an example, like let's do this all together first, and then you can do it on your own. So I can show you kind of, and that obviously works best in an in-person class. In an online class, that becomes more complicated, unless you want to kind of record yourself kind of doing it and hope that students actually watch that recording. But yeah, as far as materials, I think, it's sort of, there's so much word of mouth kind of going on right now. I think with people who are using AI, you almost have to kind of know somebody who's using it and kind of be able to adapt. I will say, as one of the SUNY AI fellows, creating a repository of helpful materials, including examples and things, is something that we're doing. There's a subgroup that is doing that. That is led by Lauren DeLaBelle, who's also a librarian. So they're putting together a repository. I don't know how quickly it will be available. They're concentrating on certain high need areas first, but that is definitely something that that group is looking toward developing. But for right
If
now,
they
I
need
think
reviewers or beta testers, I would love if you could share my name.
oh yeah, absolutely. I will. I definitely will.
Thank
But yeah, or
you.
if you have anything that you know of that you think should go in the repository or want to help us create materials, just let us know. But yeah, so that is definitely something that's coming. And we're hoping to have at least some stuff up, this spring. That is the goal. And we'll keep adding to it as time goes on.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Of course.
I also threw a link in the chat for so SUNY-wide, we're kind of trying to warehouse some of the resources that are happening around AI. So that is on one of our websites. It is not specific to assignments exactly, but it does have webinars or other opportunities for learning and professional development around this that may help. And I'll quickly answer Kate's question before going to Vanessa. The presentation recordings, I'm going to put the link in the chat for you where you can get that, and I'll include the slides in that recording as well. So Vanessa, you had a question as well.
Yes, I do have a question. I am experiencing a high value of within my students this semester of AI use. I have touched base with my dean, and she just mentioned you like have more further conversation, more in-depth conversation of what is leading the students to use AI. As I'm having conversations with the students, some of them are telling me personal reasons of why
Mm.
what leads them to use the AI use. Others, they don't really have an definitive answer in regards to using it, but they are saying, yes, I am using it. And then I have very few that says that it has been detected, but they say, no, I did not use it. Now, my question is, I know on the screen on previous slides, you said that the AI detectors are not liable.
Mhm.
Uh, However, when I have been having conversations with students as they leading, and I don't know the percentage, how accurate, and I don't know if all colleges use the same AI detectors, or we all using different AI detectors. What I gather is the one we use at the college that I teach at. They use Tune and
Mm.
it on the right it displays 100%. It just gives it a base range, but as I mentioned, majority of the students are saying to me is yes, I am using it. So then it leads to the ones that I wonder, when the ones that are saying no, I am not using AI. Where's the balance there where I'm getting a whole majority of them saying, yes, they are being honest and they are admitting to it. And then I'm leading into further details, going referring back to my syllabus about the academic integrity and pulling of the college itself to explaining it even more in depth about the use of AI. So my question, where's the balance between that, where I'm seeing that a majority of the students are telling me yes, and then there is a few that are denying. Where's the balance where, okay, do I say, okay, I'm going to just go off of the AI detector because of the majority of the students say yes, or do I? Where's the balance? And I know one professor said earlier in her thing that she's bringing back in class assignments to detect, to limit the use of the AI.
Yeah, I think that's it's a tricky situation. AI detectors are tricky, and anybody who, wants to be using them, I'm not saying don't use them. I think there are just some issues to keep in mind where they do tend to be biased and sort of label certain types of writers and certain types of writing as AI falsely more often than they do, other types of writing or other types of writers. So that's something just to pay attention to. But as far as if you suspect AI use and the AI detector is telling you that that there is AI use, but then the student says that they didn't use AI, I mean that's a tough situation to be in. I personally would err on the side of believing the student, even if in my back of my mind I'm like, I don't know, because we do know that they are imperfect, these detectors. They're not, even with plagiarism, they're not perfect. So, um, maybe they'll get better someday and or maybe, they'll be able to keep up with the developments in AI. But because there are some of those biases that do happen, I would try to, it's really good. I'm actually kind of surprised that you have so many students that are honest about it and say that they did use AI when they're sort of caught by the detector. But for the
Yeah, I
students
was.
that,
Yeah, I tell them.
yeah,
I
well,
said
good
thank
for
you for
them.
being
I'm glad
honest.
that they're
I
honest.
tell with all the conversations. I said thank you for being honest with me. I
Yeah,
appreciate
yeah.
it.
Yeah, and I see in the chat too that there's a question about what kinds of bias these detectors might have. And I think, I've read it in different places and I don't want to share inaccurate information, but I believe that there is a bias sometimes where writers of color get labeled as AI more often than white writers or writers who are writing certain kinds of writing. I don't have a specific example right off the top of my head. It's just something that I generally know about, so I don't want to speak inaccurately, but I definitely recommend investigating it yourself because just to look into it to make sure. But when it comes to students who say that that, the AI detector said that they used it and they're saying that they didn't. The best advice that I had was just, believe the student if you can. And I'm glad that you're taking the time to at least try to talk to them about it and talk about their reasons for doing it. And I know that that's, a huge burden of time and burden in other ways. But I think it can be really useful sometimes if students are willing to be honest to kind of understand, those who are willing to share why they're using it or how they're using it so that we can sort of be more aware ourselves and kind of keep that in mind. But yeah, so I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of the route that I would take.
All right, thank you, Allison. You did
Yeah,
a great
thank you.
presentation as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there other questions? I think we've covered everything I saw in the chat. So I think that's an interesting point, Victoria, too, that students
Yeah.
do not believe some of the tools are AI. And they're just thinking that this is maybe a resource that's helpful. So yeah, Teresa, right. So defining what kind of constitutes AI.
Mm.
That's another conversation to have with students. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like to make it even, sorry, I'm just throwing my 2 cents because again, I'm always trying to find different resources, and I know where I really struggle is also trying to teach students and faculty about using citation, a method that we have already in place. And I've only ever really seen reputable citations for generative AI, not assistive AI. So it really is a challenge to try to be consistent with how we're communicating to students. I can understand why people are really overwhelmed by getting different levels, and that's even at a small institution like mine, where it should be relatively easy to kind of get a concrete definition across. Sorry, just my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, that's a great 2 cent. And I think, it's important too to be reminded that just because, we think we know what we're talking about with AI, if we think we know what we're talking, when I say AI, I know what I'm talking about, but the people that I'm talking to might not know, exactly what I'm talking about. And especially on a campus like mine, where AI, different kinds of AI are such big things and such big areas of study, I've really had to kind of discipline myself to kind of be clear that most of the time I'm talking about generative AI, but there are other types of AI, and I think distinguishing between assistive and generative is also a really good distinction to make. So I'm really glad that was brought up.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Allison, for closing us on that perspective too. I am going to pull up just a closing slide for folks so that they have an idea about what is coming up. So this today's session is actually the last of our fall webinars. We've had a great semester of programming, so I would encourage you to check out the link to our webinar site that is in the chat there, and I can repost all of this. There you go, so that you can get any recordings that you might be interested in that you may have missed. We do have one session next week on Oscar on designing an implementation plan. And then looking ahead to spring, we have a couple things, topics that are already scheduled, and we have more coming. So currently to look forward to, we have some well-being best practices that are going to be discussed in January. There's Open Education Week in March, and also enhancing teaching with AI. So kind of a nice follow-up, Allison, to what you were talking about today. Trevor from FLCC, Finger Lakes Community College, Trevor Johnson Stiegelman is going to be talking about specific things we can do to enhance our teaching using AI. So a little more practical, hands-on kind of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us and for your presentation today. And thank you to all of the participants for being here.
Thank you. This was helpful. At least it made us feel a little better about it. Okay.
Absolutely. Have a good day, everyone.